Good evening, everybody. We're just waiting on Alex joining us in the channel here. I thought I would just say hello, welcome you all. Hi there, Alex. You've joined us. Great to see you. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing fine, thank you very much.
Excellent, excellent. Have you had a busy day today?
Yeah, I did. I'm a little bit excited, anxious, the usual.
Lots going on, isn't there?
Lots of work, as you
Yeah,
can imagine.
yeah. Well, it's not a bad thing. Just making sure that we have all the questions which were posted on the form which Angus put together for us. I think
Sure.
great thanks to Angus for doing a lot of the marketing of this and making sure that we can get as many people in tonight. I will also say that it's all being recorded and we will have it transcribed. So anybody can listen or read the questions and answers in the future. So hopefully we will have that all together over the next couple of days, so that everybody that couldn't be here can get a chance to hear and read what's been said tonight.
Yeah, and I would like to thank you and Gus for doing an amazing job putting this session together and gathering all the questions. Like, we have a lot of great questions here ahead of us, so it's going to be intense.
Excellent.
I can't wait.
Excellent. So if you're comfortable, we can I can get started and we'll get these questions underway. How are you feeling?
Yeah, sure. And first of all, I would like to thank everyone here personally for great support and for being here for us. We appreciate it very much. The team is very thankful to the community for all the support and all the help that we're getting. So yeah, it's great. So let's get started.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I've basically categorized the questions so that one may lead into another, and we can get on with that, and people can understand what we're talking about. So Beam as a company was the first set of questions that Angus collated for us, and the first question to you tonight is: so why is Beam called Beam? Is there a story behind it?
Yeah, of course, there's a story. Obviously. So, an interesting one, I think. So, the name Beam was actually invented by Guy Corem in the beginning of 2018, long before we even started working on this project. And I think most of you know that Guy is not only the originator, but also the soul behind this project. And initially, the name Beam came as this kind of wordplay on green, because green is like this kind of smile, and Beam is this just like wider, happier smile. So this was like the original idea, but very quickly it got a lot of additional connotations, most of them, as you imagine, related to light. So for example, our implementation of the lighting network, we call it the laser beam, and it also influenced our logo. And an interesting thing here is that most people see our logo as this kind of a prism where like the white light goes from the white sign and then it's broken into different wavelengths, so you see them as different colors. But I actually see it exactly the opposite way, like all these different beams going in and coming out as one single, like merged into one single white beam, and it's a little bit similar to the transactions in MIMBLEWIMBLE, which are merged inside the blocks and they become inseparable. And also, of course, for those of us who are a little bit older, it reminds of this great album by Pink Floyd called The Dark Side of the Moon. And since it's the dark side, so it's like more private, so there's this privacy angle here as well. So yeah, a lot of layers and connotations.
Excellent. I think there were a lot of the community had ideas to where the name came from, and I think that's probably clarified for a few members, which is good. That's great. That's great. I like the Pink Floyd connotation personally. So the next question under the Beam Company category: is there any plan for rebranding Beam to a different name in the future?
Not at the moment. I really like this name, and I would like it to remain the same. Even though sometimes it causes a little bit of confusion, because, for example, when we launched our Android wallet a couple of days ago, there is another wallet also called Beam, in the Google Play Store. So sometimes it's confusing, but I really like this name. I think it got us so far. I wouldn't change it for the world.
Absolutely. So Beam has some great tech and more on the way, but the days are past in crypto when you could take a if you build it, they will come type of approach. Does Beam have interested partners and businesses that are actively looking at integrating the tech? And if so, can you tell us about them? If not, what's the plan there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, you really have to build it. So, yeah, this is the basis for everything. And if you look at our roadmap for 2019, you can clearly see that our intention is to make Beam the best cryptocurrency out there. We think that the features that we're adding, such as atomic swap, one-side payments, and like all the usability features that we're adding, different wallets, and um, of course, it's the basis for the whole thing. So if we manage to make Beam as usable and as practical as we really want it to be, I think it will be a great start. And of course, it doesn't stop there. So we are constantly talking to different um, payment service providers, and maybe some of you saw in the community and Telegram recently photos of the ATM machines that are integrating Beam right now. So yeah, we definitely are not stopping at building the tech. We're also working very hard at making it really practical in the real world. There is a lot of work we invest in it in many different directions, and like I think in following questions, I will elaborate a little bit about more long-term plans that we have for Beam and the additional features that we want to be on top of Beam as a technology platform. So yeah, we are definitely investing a lot of effort into attracting partners and making Beam usable in the real world.
Excellent, excellent. Can you please describe the process which an international company would go through to use Beam as a means of transferring money internationally? How simple and seamless will this process be? For example, would they have to purchase or sell Beam on an exchange on each end? Or what security measures would be in place from a user perspective? Two-factor authentication or multi-signature perhaps? From a process perspective, how will financial regulations and audit requirements be met? While some of these points are touched on in the roadmap, the purpose of this question is to have a concise description that could be presented to a company and try and get them interested in learning more about Beam and how it could improve their processors. For example, cost of transfers, amount of time for transfers, security of transfers. It's quite a long-winded question, but I think we get the gist of that.
Um, yes, in fact, it's a little bit early, I think, right now to discuss specific ways of using Beam features for enterprise and companies because we are still in the process of designing and developing them. But I would like to address a few issues from this question on a more like broad basis.
Of course.
And one of them has to do with compliance. And compliance is basically one of these like more complex and interesting concepts that we're addressing at Beam. And I would like to talk a little bit about what this means and how this can be used. And I think it's very important for companies to understand where we're going with that.
Please do.
So if you're a business that wants to receive, for example, Beam as a way of payment, just like with any other currency, you have to do certain things, like, for example, be able to attach documentation such as receipts or contracts to any transaction. You should be able to show your income and expenses to the authorities and to pay your taxes and be audited and all the regular things that all the businesses do all the time. So this is like the easy part. We call it vertical compliance. It's basically the ability to be accountable for the things you are actually doing and how exactly you are conducting your business. And we're working on that. However, there is another axis here, which we call horizontal compliance, and it's a little bit more interesting. And I will give an example of how this works today, for example, in Bitcoin. So in Bitcoin, since all the transactions and amounts are visible and the addresses are easily traceable, it actually works using companies like Chainalysis, which do network analysis on the transaction graph, and they can actually tell whether a specific transaction has touched or coming through a wallet which was suspected in some kind of illegal activity, and they can attach a risk score to this transaction. So each organization can decide whether it wants to receive or accept these bitcoins depending on its risk appetite. So banks and exchanges, for example, might reject this transaction on this basis. And the fact that they're actually able to trace the transaction to its source, like when this specific coin was born, and to see all the way how it got to the point where it is now, is the basis of this horizontal compliance today. Now, in confidential cryptocurrencies, this is of course not possible because the blockchain is not transparent. You cannot see anything there. However, this idea of being able to trace this is today is actually de facto standard for this compliance in the world of cryptocurrencies. What we have to do is to be able to supply the solution that will not affect the confidentiality of the network as in general, because one thing compliance is not, and it's very important to understand, it does not mean that anyone can see your personal data, your transactions, and it does not in any way affect the confidentiality of the network, but you still should be able to show what is called in professional world the source of funds, like how you got this money and how it's passed through the system, because this is how it works today in the old school world of banks. This is how the banks are being regulated. And there are many ways of doing that, and the challenge here for us is to understand exactly how to implement this functionality so that a business can conduct legal activities regulated by the local authorities in a way which is compliant to the local regulations using BEAM. So this is exactly the challenge we're facing right now and that we're working on.
Excellent. And I think the next question, you've probably answered this next question in the answer to that previous question, but do you have a strategy regarding countries with regulations that oppose privacy coins?
Yes, we are staying on top of all the current trends in the regulation, and it's constantly changing. There are very few countries today that really have, like closed and decided regulation for cryptocurrencies in general and for confidential cryptocurrencies in particular. But we are doing a lot of research and consulting a lot and trying to understand all the requirements of what it means to be regulated cryptocurrency. So yeah, it's definitely part of our day-to-day effort to figure out how this should really work and to find this way of combining the confidentiality, which in our opinion is the essential property of a cryptocurrency, with the ability to regulate it. So yeah, it's a good question, I think.
Yeah, I think with the development of opt-in auditability, it's the first step to working closely with these kind of regulations. So yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
So more regarding the company itself, what is the reasoning for adding the Genesis Mining CEO as an advisor, and what other advisors does BEAM have so far?
Yeah, so I will not answer this question about Marcus Strength specifically, but I would like to talk about our advisors in general and the way we operate. So as you can imagine from the early days, we have always needed a lot of help and advice from people who are really experienced in this industry and who can really help us with different aspects of this very, multivariate world of cryptocurrencies, starting from mining and integrations and trading and exchanges and all the other aspects. So what we have done, we have tried to attract the best people we think that can help us to navigate in this complex landscape of this industry. So each and every one of our advisors are very knowledgeable and experienced person in his field, and each and every one of them helped us to get where we are today and learn about the business and make right decisions at right points of time. So this is why they have been chosen, and they helped us a lot, and we are very thankful to them and appreciate what they've done for us.
Absolutely, and the advisors, as you can see from the website, there is a list of the advisors of Beam with their pictures and their LinkedIn profiles linked to it as well, so anybody can have a look at the website and see who the advisors are. So, one of the competitive advantages of Beam is the development team, who assures speedy developments of different functionalities on Beam wallets. This user would like to know more about the team, where there were significant challenges and that the team encountered in the past.
So our team is really amazing, and I'm saying that because so I really enjoy working with them. And the interesting fact here is that not even one of our current team, like, and I'm talking not just R&D, but the entire company, was hired from outside through a recruiter. Like everybody is a friend and was brought into the team by a friend. So many of these people, I know them for years. Some of are close personal friends of mine. I worked together with many of them on previous projects. So it's a very friendly group of people who know each other for a long time. And this helps a lot because, as you can imagine, on a day-to-day, we have a lot of challenges and a lot of difficult problems to solve.
Absolutely.
And outside of the great technical talent and the ability that this team brings, I think the human factor here was one of the most important in our ability to produce and deliver Beam in such a short period of time. Like it was like 9 months from March 2018 till our launch on January 3rd, 2019. And the only way this could have worked is by great collaboration. And we actually like feel it every day. This friendship and this ability to communicate, in a very constructive and productive manner. I think it was amazing so far. I'm very proud of the team. They are a group of very diverse people from many different countries. It's a very international company. So yeah, I don't even know how to say that, but it's really been an amazing experience working with people.
Yeah,
absolutely. Regarding the challenges, so yeah, as you can imagine, we had quite a few, and one of the biggest challenges was working as an open source project because none of the team had experience with open source projects before, and I think it shows. Like anyone who like knows a little bit about this sees that we're a little bit struggling with this whole open source idea because it's not just going to GitHub and clicking make this repository public, because it's much more than that. Being able to communicate and document properly and attract developers. So this was one of the great challenges. We did a lot of work on that. We still have a lot of room to improve. But this is like one of them. Also, this team was relatively new to the world of blockchain development, and we had to learn everything and pick up things fast as we go. This was yet another challenge. And of course, it's not exactly a challenge, but it's like something special, I think, that almost everyone in the R&D team at least experienced, is that it was the first time that we have delivered a project which is actually used by people and attract community and gets all the attention and all this like crazy, interest all of a sudden. And, we launch and suddenly there are a lot of miners and traders and exchanges listers and, pools and the action and the attention that this project got. I think it got everyone by surprise. And I think people are still amazed a little bit on how it went. So, yeah. That was interesting to experience as well.
It is quite overwhelming sometimes, the speed that these things take off. Having been involved in this industry for quite a while now, you can see how the difficulties that would encounter, especially even with the friendships and the camaraderie that the team has. There's always something to do. You know what I mean? So.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, on to the next category of questions, and there's a few questions about mining. So, the first one being, Beam will be conducting 2 hard forks this year to stay ASIC resistant. However, after
Right.
the final hard fork, is it probable that ASIC manufacturers will roll out their models in the market? Does the development team have any plans of imposing protocol upgrades to protect GPU miners from ASIC miners?
So from the very beginning, we always said that Beam as a company does not have a strict anti-ASIC policy, but we did want to give GPUs a head start, which is why we have announced 2 planned forks, as we have mentioned. The one is coming up in June, and the other one probably in December, in order to stay ASIC resistant for about a year and a half, if we are counting from the beginning, so from the launch of the project in January.
Mm-hmm.
But after that, I don't think so. We will have any problems with ASICs. Of course, it will depend on the profitability of this operation and other factors. But in general, we do not have long-term anti-ASIC policy at the moment.
Excellent. And when will ASIC miners be launched to mine Beam?
So once again, if we're successful and if it's actually commercially viable to produce ASICs for Beam, I believe it will happen probably sometime towards the end of the next year, if this happens at all.
Mm-hmm.
Our algorithm EQUIHASH is relatively difficult to efficiently implement in ASICs today, but the technology moves forward, and I believe if Beam is successful enough, there will be ASICs.
So,
But I don't know when.
yeah, yeah. You touched on the EQUIHASH proof of work mining algorithm. Beam uses a
Right.
modified version, which is 1505. Could you maybe explain what exactly is the difference between the modified and the original version, and how this modification benefits Beam miners specifically?
Yes. So the most popular EQUIHASH implementation until we launched was that of Zcash, it's called Zhash, and it has 144 by 5 parameters. And we wanted to make sure that there will be no ready ASICs at the moment we launch. So this is why we have modified the parameters to 150 by 5. And what it practically means is the requirement of the amount of memory that you need to be able to mine Beam, which is why it makes it much more suitable for GPUs. And at the moment, I think the best GPUs that can mine Beam are actually mid-range AMD cards and some mid-range NVIDIA cards. So you don't even need a high-end card to effectively mine Beam. So this is the situation, and this is why we chose these parameters. I think it was a very good choice. Um, we're actually happy with the results. We have quite a steady amount of miners today, and it's been good.
Absolutely. As a miner myself, I've been quite quite enjoying mining some beams with the small amount of cards that I have at home. So backtracking a little bit to the company and the compliance parts. A community member has asked, will companies or customers using Beam compliance be disclosed?
Yeah. So once again, the word compliance here can mean several different things. The most difficult part of compliance is actually the currency part. But for example, if you just want to attach documentation to transactions, this is of course a very simple operation. You can just add, for example, a hash of the document to the transaction kernel, and you can always prove that both sides saw this document and agreed on its terms before they conducted the transaction. This is, by the way, where the communicational nature of the MIMBLEWIMBLE protocol, the fact that both sides actually participate in the creation of the transaction, helps a lot. Because unlike Bitcoin, where you just send someone a transaction without his consent, here both parties have to agree on it, and this is also like part of the compliance. So I will not conduct a transaction with you if you have not provided specific documentation that I require or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, of course, I think any company or customer that's going to use BEAM compliance, they will use it for the way they're conducting their business. It's not going to be a secret. On the other hand, the transaction, the compliant transaction, the transaction that has any additional compliance-related information will still be indistinguishable, so that we do not actually affect the confidentiality of the network.
Yeah, absolutely. I would think possibly that companies or customers who are going to be using this technology would be proud to be using it. And if their assets and documentation is kept private, then there's no need not to disclose that information. Right? So,
I believe so.
Yeah. So will the Beam compliance be a free or a paid service? And will the compliance wallets be open sourced?
So I do not see the compliance as a service exactly. It's more like a support for a wide family of services. And some of these services may be paid, and some of them may be free, and some of them may be open source. And of course, the base protocol and the code of Beam will be open source at all times. But you can actually build a lot of things above it, and I will talk a little bit about it going forward of what exactly can be built on top of things, even on top of Beam even today. But the compliance right now is more like a layer that supports and enables many kinds of different services, but the services themselves may vary greatly.
Excellent. So the next category of questions, I'm sure you will be overjoyed to hear it's your speciality really is the tech, the nitty gritty of Beam. And there's quite a few questions here, so we'll start at the top and work down. How will Team Beam address ECC post-quantum vulnerability?
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about quantum computing and what it means for cryptography in general and for Beam specifically and how we address that. So the idea is that today we depend on the fact that the elliptic curve cryptography is unbreakable in a way using the current computing resources. So it would not be feasible to crack elliptic curve cryptography using the computers that exist today. However, quantum computers have this promise of being big enough one day and powerful enough to be able to crack these cryptographic structures. So, as you know, in Beam, we are using the so-called PEDERSON commitment. The PEDERSON commitment is one of the possible implementations of a cryptographic commitment scheme. And just to explain in few words what it means, let's say I would like to commit to some message. So what I do, I write this message on a piece of paper and I put it in a small vault, which I lock with a combination lock, and I give it to you. So now you're holding this vault. You cannot open it because you don't know the combination. On the other hand, I cannot go back on the message that I wrote because you have it, and I cannot take this out of the box. So these are actually the two essential properties of a cryptographic commitment. One is called hiding, which means you cannot see it. And the other one is called binding, which means that I cannot go back on my commitment. I cannot really take it back. So the PEDERSON commitment is a specific commitment scheme which is based on elliptic curve cryptography, and it has this property of the hiding being what is called computationally sound. So no matter how many resources you have, you can never open this box and see what the message is inside. However, it's not binding enough. So it is only computationally binding. So if you have enough resources, say you have a quantum computer, you can actually change the commitment. So that you can change the amount within, and the commitment will still look the same. So it's not binding enough. And what it means that if somebody really has a quantum computer, he can actually break Beam and MIMBLEWIMBLE in general, and probably many other cryptographic schemes. So what is actually done in order to avoid this, and this is like very interesting trick, There is a different commitment scheme. It's called El Gamal commitment. And it's actually the opposite of Pedersen in a way that it's perfectly, perfectly binding, but it's not only computationally hiding. And what we have done, and it's already deployed in Beam mainnet today, when we create the Pedersen commitment, the blinding factor is actually a hash of an El Gamal commitment. And this concept is called switch commitment. So tomorrow, if a large enough quantum computer will be ready, what is going to happen is that we will just upgrade our network. And in addition to testing Pedersen commitment, we will also test the built-in El Gamal commitment in addition to that. And since the hash process in the middle does not give quantum computers any advantage, it actually will be quantum resistant. Now, you may ask why we didn't just do it in the first place and just use El Gamal commitment. And the reason for that is that it's computationally more intense and it will put more strain on the system. So as we don't need it right now, but it's there, and if the moment comes and the quantum computers will be available, this is what is going to happen.
Fantastic. Fantastic. That's a lot to take in. So when will Atomic Swap be ready, and which coins will be available?
So we have started working on Atomic actually in October last year, and we had to put it aside for some time before the launch due to enormous amount of tasks we had to accomplish. And we came back to it in February, in mid-February this year. And we are working on it full speed. I believe the first version, which at first will be just a CLI wallet, and it will require full Bitcoin node at first to operate. I believe it will be launched in the next several weeks. Right now, the success scenario, or the successful swap is actually working already in Bitcoin. And I believe that in the next 2 days, I will record a video demo of this process. It's really exciting. However, it also has a lot of possible error scenarios that you have to handle within the process. And I would just like to drop in the text channel a small diagram of how this actually works. I'll drop it here. I hope you will see it. So as you can see, the process of the atomic swap is quite complicated. It requires the creation of several transactions. One that is locking funds on the Bitcoin network, and the other one which is locked funds on the Beam network. And then you have to create 2 additional transactions, one to redeem the locked UTXO in case of the success scenario, and one to refund in case the swap didn't go well. I need to get my money back. And as you can see from the diagram, this is a process with many different steps. It involves creating 2x2 multisigs in the middle so that we have shared ownership of the UTXO. And what we need to do right now, so it's already in the testing phase, basically, and what we need to do right now is to make sure that all these error cases are handled. And then we will release this feature. The good news is that out of the box, it will support not only Bitcoin, but Litecoin and probably many other Bitcoin forks, because it works in a very similar way. Sometimes there are differences in the APIs that we need to handle, but the concepts are the same. So yeah, we believe it will work on Bitcoin, Litecoin, and probably some other Bitcoin clones.
Great. Thanks for that, and thanks for the diagram which explains it pretty well. GhostDAG is described as one of the new consensus mechanisms that will be researched for adoption in Beam's base layer. Can you tell us a little bit about GhostDAG, how it differs from the current Nakamoto consensus, and what pros and cons it will potentially present?
Oh, yeah, so as you know, one of the issues is always the one with scalability in terms of transactions per second. The problem with any proof of work blockchain, the number of transactions per second in Beam today is something around 20 transactions per second, which is nice, but of course it doesn't really allow massive use for micropayments and things like that. So protocols like GhostDAG and all the DAG-based protocols come to resolve this problem. So using these protocols results in faster confirmation, eventually higher transaction per second rate, and it also brings you better decentralization because there are much more blocks being created, and even though the block reward will be smaller, still everyone will take a small share. Like there are more blocks created because unlike blockchain, which is just a sequence of blocks, the DAG, which is an acronym for Directed Acyclic Graph, is actually having a lot of branches living simultaneously and then eventually collapsing into some consensus, and it allows for faster confirmation times that way. I will not go deeply into the details of the implementation of those DAG, but this is one of the things we're definitely looking at, but in the farther future. So it will probably not happen anytime soon. But this is one of the algorithms we are researching and looking at as a future option, like going forward.
Excellent. It's certainly one of the main interests of my own personally. I've watched the direct cyclic graph technology evolve. It's already in use across other platforms, not necessarily cryptocurrencies, but it's certainly it's an excellent technology. So I personally will wish you the best of luck with that one. I have this community member says, I have a question I've not been able to get to the bottom of. MIMBLEWIMBLE outputs are recorded to the owner on the blockchain. These records are somehow related to the user's mnemonic phrase used to set up their wallet, but an address isn't recorded on the blockchain. So, what is the value or function derived from the mnemonic that is used to record the owner of UTXOs?
Okay, so the way it works is basically like this. You have your seed phrase, which in our case is 12 words, and it is used to generate this key that we call the base key. Now, from this base key, using a technique called hierarchical pseudo-random key derivation, we can derive many different other keys. And for example, when we create a new UTXO, it has this value and the blinding factor. So the blinding factor is actually derived from that key, and it's every time, right? So each UTXO has a different blinding factor. However, all the UTXOs are tagged using a concept that we call an owner key, so that you can easily recognize your UTXOs in the blockchain, but nobody else can do it except for you, because you are the only one who knows your mnemonic and hence all the keys that can be derived from it. So this is how it works. You don't need an address to recognize your UTXOs. What you need is just to know your mnemonic, and from that you can derive all the keys and all the blinding factors that you need to get all your UTXOs from the blockchain at any time. I hope this answers the question.
Yeah. Very interesting. The next one is regarding a technology which is in use in other cryptocurrencies, namely Bitcoin. That's proof of existence. Will Beam be adding a proof of existence service, and can this be inbuilt to the wallet?
The concept of proof of existence it's very interesting. It goes back, I think, to 2013 or something.
Yeah.
And in a way, when we talk about adding documents to the transactions, like for example, contracts or receipts or things like that, in a way, it's a partial implementation of the concept. So at any point in time, you can prove that this specific document was reviewed by one, two, or several parties. And actually existed at the time of the block creation. So it's kind of a partial, specific case for the proof of existence service in a way. And what we're going to do is to use this concept and extend it to different financial applications. So yeah, you can say that we have something similar to proof of existence service on top of Beam. Not exactly maybe for the originally intended purpose, but we use this concept for the financial world, right? Also, that's part of the plan.
Quite a similar use case, but it will be inbuilt to the wallet, perhaps?
At some point, of course, the ability to add documentation to the transaction will be added to the wallet. Absolutely.
Fantastic. So in Beam, there are no addresses. If there are no addresses, why is there a blockchain explorer?
So the blockchain explorer in Beam serves several different purposes. First of all, you can see that the network is alive. You can see the hash rate, and you can see that the blocks actually are produced at the, on average every minute as intended. This is like the first purpose of seeing that everything is good with the world.
Mm-hmm.
And the other purpose is to be able to prove that the specific transaction actually took place. For example, if I send you a transaction and you actually receive it, but then you come and you deny it. You say, wait a minute, I did not receive anything. Like you owe me money.
Mm-hmm.
My way today to prove that this transaction will actually happen is to take the transaction kernel, which is unique, and to find it in the Explorer and show you the block in which this transaction was included.
Mm-hmm.
But this is not enough because, as we know, the transaction is completely opaque. You cannot actually extract information from it. So what we've done, we have added another mechanism, which is called payment proof, and it's enabled by default in all the newer versions of our wallet. And what it actually does is that every time the receiver receives a transaction and sends back a message to the sender,
Mm-hmm.
as part of this message, he sends a signature, which is basically signed using the private key that matches the public SBBS address. And it allows the sender to prove not only that this transaction took place, but that this specific receiver actually received and signed it. So the signature itself is not enough, but together with the kernel that appears in the blockchain, two of these proofs are sufficient to prove beyond any reasonable doubt to anyone in case of any dispute that the transaction was actually received.
Excellent. Moving on. MIMBLEWIMBLE was initially scriptless, but then scriptless scripts have been implemented. Are there any security side effects of this?
Well, scriptless script is actually this like interesting term because it's a little bit misleading in a way, and I'll explain what I mean. So
Okay.
in Bitcoin, each transaction is described as a Bitcoin in Bitcoin script, and it's actually sometimes kind of a condition. So what it says, give this money to the person who knows the private key for this publicly known address.
Mm-hmm.
It's like an if statement. If you know this, you can have that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is how the transactions are represented in Bitcoin. In Ethereum, of course, you have like full-blown smart contracts which are written in language called Solidity, which is much more complicated. So it's even bigger than that. But in MIMBLEWIMBLE, the whole genius and the basis of the idea is that the transaction is actually presented as a series of inputs and outputs, each of which is just a Pederson commitment describing it. And then you have the transaction kernel, which has all the additional information and the excess of the binding factors. So there is no script which describes the transaction. However, you still can add some logic to this transaction, but it's not described in a scripting language. It's just built into the system as a building block. And for example, like some of the parameters that we have is maturity. So I can create a transaction which can only be sent to the network starting with a specific block. It will be rejected by the node if it's sent to the node before that. So this is the maturity parameter. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I can create hash and time locks, right? Like the ones we use in atomic swap. Mm-hmm. So I will give you this transaction only if you know this secret and only at a specific time. So what scriptless script basically means is that instead of using a scripting language, we are creating the same types of logic using other types of cryptographic primitives. From the one perspective, it makes extension of the protocol a little bit more difficult because it often requires upgrade of the node software. But on the other hand, it's handled on the first layer. It's first-class citizen of the node, all this logic. And once you do have enough building blocks, you can build a lot of complicated scenarios such as escrow transactions. And in the future, we intend to use it a lot for confidential assets, which I will talk about a little bit later. Mm-hmm. So this is what scriptless script actually means. It does not have any security side effects. On the opposite, since this is something which is essential and integral part of the first layer protocol, it's actually much faster, better tested, and more robust than just a contract written on top of something.
Very interesting. So the next question from the community member says, I understand that Beam is using confidential TX and the PEDERSON commitment, but I cannot sort out the relationship between the two concepts. Can you explain this for us, maybe in a layman's terms?
Yes, I'll try to. So confidential, the idea of confidential transaction is that you have basically who is sending, to whom he is sending, like the sender, the receiver, and the amount, the three parameters that we have. And each and every one of confidential cryptocurrencies has solved the problem of hiding these parameters differently. And in MIMBLEWIMBLE, what was being done is that we said, first of all, we're not recording any addresses in the blockchain. So they're just not there. No matter how many computing resources you have, you cannot know who was the sender and who was the receiver because this information is just not being recorded in the blockchain at all. As for the value of the transaction, we do encode it, we do encrypt it as a PEDERSON commitment, as I mentioned earlier. And hence, the transaction, the confidential transaction, is basically built out of series of PEDERSON commitments describing the inputs and outputs of the specific transaction. So, coming back to the question, the PEDERSON commitment is the building block of the confidential transaction in the MIMBLEWIMBLE protocol.
Excellent. So bringing Ethereum's assets to Beam as planned for LUMINI has an advantage, but could you run complex smart contract applications like MAKERDAO on the MIMBLEWIMBLE chain? And is there any plan to have these types of smart contract applications on Beam?
Well, this is a very interesting topic. I will talk about it briefly because it can really go on for hours. So the LUMINI project is an idea of being able to move assets between chains, specifically from the Ethereum chain to Beam, and then trade it confidentially on Beam. So this is the first step. And then at some point you can move it back to the Ethereum and sell it there. So this is like a two-way bridge between two completely different blockchains. And we have discussed several options of implementing that. And of course, the best, the completely decentralized option would be to just completely, link in a way these two networks together. But that would require that every Beam node is aware of all Ethereum contracts, essentially running Ethereum virtual machine and calculating all the contracts by itself in order to be able to validate it. Otherwise, it would not be completely decentralized. You have to, some kind of trust in the middle. So this concept was rejected at first because I think it would be impractical in the near future to implement something like that. However, we had this kind of compromise that if you do have some centralized contract which you can use to lock your assets on Ethereum and then in exchange create new type of confidential assets on top of Beam and then trade them and move them back, even though the contract itself is centralized, it still can work. I can share with you two diagrams and just very, very high level ideas about this, but I think they're interesting to think about of how this may work. It's just very schematic, but I think it illustrates the concept that we're trying to achieve. And yes, this is one of the things we actively research right now, because this idea of having Ethereum assets on top of Beam and being able to trade them in confidential manner, I think it's very interesting. There are a lot of projects today that doing different types of bridges, and we are in touch with some of them, and we're researching this topic very deeply. I believe this will be one of the things that we will focus on in the near future, definitely.
Excellent, excellent. So there are plans to move to Rust, but what is the current status and issues of Rust, and what are the criteria for making the decision to shift?
So as you know, Rust is a very interesting and popular programming language today. Green is implemented in Rust, and it has a lot of interesting properties. It's kind of an evolution of the C++ language in terms of memory management and error handling. It has a lot of improvements. It's actually very cool. software to run in the near future. But we're definitely looking at this programming language for like several future developments. So yeah, it's cool. We're thinking about it. I'm not sure we will do it soon.
Cool. And what is the current process at Beam Hard Fork? How is it different from Bitcoin?
Yeah, so the nearest fork, or the fork, it's an upgrade which we're planning is, as I said in June, to switch the proof of work algorithm. We're currently designing the procedure of how it's going to work, and we approach this with a lot of planning and care because you know it's a very delicate process. I'm not sure I get point, but as for us, we're just starting planning this. As I mentioned, it will happen in June. So yeah, we're still thinking about how to do this right. You know,
cool.
Very carefully.
Yeah. Completely understand that. When will the hardware wallet go on sale? Will it be open source?
So right now we're working on implementing for the Trezor T model of the hardware wallet. It will be open source. We're not going to produce our own hardware wallet or something like that. It's just another application on top of Trezor. And there are some technical challenges we're facing there with bulletproof implementation and like making it work with small amounts of memory. So because when you create keys and sign transactions on the computer, you have almost unlimited resources, so it all works very fast. And when you are creating the transaction on the hardware device, which is smaller, has less capacity and less processing power, we have to do more optimization. So that's why it takes some time. But we're working on that. I believe it will be ready soon. You will be able to use the hardware wallet with Beam. And also there is a difference because, as I said, in MIMBLEWIMBLE, the transaction is created interactively both by sender and the receiver. So the protocol also works differently. And once we are done with this first initial implementation for Trezor T, we immediately will move on to Ledger and other popular hardware wallets.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
So how is the progress on Beam's Lightning Network, and when will that go live?
Okay, so the Lightning Network, which we call LaserBeam, is actually a two-part question because the first part is to create point-to-point transactions. Okay, so you have the way Lightning works is that you create a funded channel, you lock some funds on the blockchain. Then two wallets transact directly, and then after some period of time, the last transaction in this exchange is being sent to the chain, and that settles basically this open funded channel. And the trick here is not to allow send any one of the previous transactions, and because if that happens, you can basically cheat someone into thinking that he got some funds that he actually didn't. So this is the first part we're doing. We're adding the relative time lock functionality, which is required in order to make this mechanism work. It will be added in our fork in June. But the other part of the Lightning Network is the routing, and it's actually more complicated and more interesting because you have to have a funded channel between 2 points, between two wallets, in order to so you don't have to actually create a channel every time between every two wallets. And at this point, what we're thinking about is having this work on a fixed topology, so that you cannot actually route through like any network at any time, because this is like one of the unsolved problems in the Lightning Network, in general, that you cannot easily calculate the route between the 2 points. It's constantly changing, the funding changes. And what we're thinking about is to making it work at first in the hub and spoke architecture, where you have one central or several central hubs to which many different clients connect. And this, I believe, can work. So right now, what we're doing is we're building a demo, which I hope we will show you soon, of this point-to-point communications. And right after that, we will start working on routing. It's very difficult to estimate right now how much time it will take to implement completely, but we are already working on it, so it's moving forward.
Okay. And will it be possible to select a certain node or run a local node on the Beam mobile wallet?
Yeah, this is also a two-part question. Selecting a certain node, yes, definitely we will. Next version, it was omitted for different, product reasons, but of course, it will be a setting that will allow you to select any node, including your own, if you like. Running a local node on a Beam mobile wallet, it's possible. You can do that. We have done that. However, the exact use case, so as you know, it requires quite a lot of traffic. It requires quite a lot of battery life because the processing is intense. And what we have tried to do initially is to do this combination so that you have an ability to restore a wallet on mobile device, which requires a node, because you have to download the blockchain and recognize your UTXOs, as I mentioned, using your owner key, and then delete this information and just connect to a remote node and continue working like that. However, it still requires quite a lot of resources from the mobile device, the battery life and memory that you need, like 700 megabytes free just to download the blockchain and things like that. So we're still testing whether it will be practical. And the answer in the end is that yes, it's possible, but I'm not sure at this moment how practical it will be. So, but yeah, we're testing that right now. One second, I just want to add to this one more thing. That, actually, except for this memory requirement, Beam node is actually requires relatively low resources to run. So in general, it can be possible to run it on even like platforms with weaker resources, like to just create a small box which can run Beam nodes. That's possible.
Who has the better tech, Beam or Grin?
Yeah, well, it's not about who has the better tech, because let's say it that way. There is nothing Beam can do that Grin can't, and vice versa, right? So basically, the technologies are similar in a way. There are some differences today. Like for example, in Beam you can have identical UTXOs, which allows us to create this feature of one-side payments. And then the idea of one-side payments, I don't know if you are familiar with it, is that you can basically pre-create partial UTXOs and create some kind of, we call it a coin list, and then send it to the other party. And then you can just go offline, and at any time, the sender, just like in Bitcoin, can create transactions and directly just send it to the network, and you will receive them eventually whenever you come online. However, it has some privacy trade-offs. So if anybody knows these UTXOs that you published, he can trace that these specific transactions belong to you. So it has limited use, for example, for donations or any other scenarios where privacy is less important, but you do want this freedom of not being online at all. So this is like just one of the differences, and there are several more. But I wouldn't go as far as saying that there is like better tech on Beam or Green. Like it's really not about that.
I think perhaps it was a bit of a tongue-in-cheek question, but I thought I'd ask it because it was there.
Yeah, I get that.
So, is development currently taking place on Beam confidential assets?
Yes, absolutely. So we have built support for confidential assets on Beam to enable it from day one. However, how to actually use it, there are several different scenarios that we're currently thinking about. The idea of confidential assets is that you can create an emission of a different type of asset. So you can trade not just Beam on the Beam network, but actually a different asset which might represent some other currency. It may have some other emission. It may have its own rules. And the way it works is basically by adding additional generators to these PEDERSON committees that I described. So just extend the amount of different tokens you can trade on Beam. It allows for a lot of very interesting use cases, and we're currently investigating different possibilities of making this work. From STO platform that you can actually issue tokens, security tokens on. Maybe creating a stable coin on top of Beam. So there are a lot of options how to use that. I think this is one of the more interesting features that has a lot of potential in the near future. And yeah, we're definitely developing it, and we're definitely thinking about different use cases. And yeah, we will announce once we have some interesting implementation, details to report. We will update.
I know we're quite time limited tonight, but the next question is asking in detail. If you can maybe give a as concise an answer as is possible to this next one. Not quite sure it will be possible to do so, but how can you explain? Can you explain how confidential assets are actually created in detail? Is there a way in which one might be able to run a project develop on top of the Beam blockchain?
Yes. I will explain that there are several ways in which confidential assets can be done. The one that is currently supported by the chain already, but it's not enabled yet, and is the following idea. So you have this PEDERSON commitment, which is like just the sum of two factors. Like you have the value and you have the blinding factor, and each of them is multiplied by a different generator on the curve, on the elliptic curve. So if you add another generator, right? So you have V multiplied by generator, and now I add another generator and I have another value. Let's call it V1. So this V1 can actually represent a different asset. So within the same transaction, I can actually transfer several types of assets. So this is like one of the possible ways to implement. And the way it works is that I just as an emitter, like I can create an emission as an owner of this new asset, very similar to the ERC20 concept actually. I can create a new asset, I can create an emission of some amount of this asset and start trading them with people. And also I'm the one who can burn them later. So I can receive an asset back and I can burn it, take it out of the circulation. I think this is the simplest way to explain that. However, we do not yet have support for that in the wallet. So we can play with it on testnet and all kinds of development chains, but it's not really enabled on the mainnet yet.
Excellent. Well, thanks for your honesty on all of those questions, because some of those were quite in depth. Moving on to probably the penultimate section of the AMA tonight. It's just general crypto questions. The first one being, Beam delivers on the properties of sound money, but it is still hard to attribute any intrinsic value to Beam and most cryptocurrencies. Is there any plan in the future to embark on a project that would add some intrinsic value to Beam?
Yeah, I think we have touched on some of the points before. I think any system that can actually use Beam in practical scenarios, if those are like confidential assets or payment platforms, are actually adding value to Beam beyond just mining, selling, and all the stuff that we're doing right now.
Absolutely.
And we are definitely constantly looking for opportunities to engage in such projects with many different organizations. Absolutely. Great. Yeah. So yeah, we're working hard exactly on that.
Oh, I can see that. So our CEO, Mr. Zeidelson, mentioned in an interview somewhere that Beam could come a top 5 coin based on market cap. But where do you place it around the end of this year in terms of adoption, exchanges, functional product?
So I don't have all the statistics and calculations in front of me in terms of exact amount of coins being issued on market caps and things like that. But in terms of adoption, exchanges, and functional products, I can assure you that all these things are moving forward at a great pace. So adoption as one is the function of the things we discussed before of how usable Beam is and where you can actually apply it. Exchanges are moving forward as well, slowly but surely. Functionality is something that we are very focused on. Our roadmap reflects that we're constantly adding useful functions that we think can be really beneficial to the platform, to the currency as a whole, starting from atomic swap, which I think will be a killer feature, and many other additional improvements. so yeah, we are on the road to this exact position. So this is our goal, to becoming top cryptocurrency, really useful, really reliable, and practical. So these are the top values of Beam as a project: practicality, usability, and confidentiality, of course, and stability.
So the next question is one which the community team have been answering time and time and time and time again. Obviously, for purposes of honesty and integrity tonight, we're including this question directly to you, Alex. Is the reason for Beam not being listed on a major exchange because there is something wrong with Beam?
So there is nothing wrong with Beam, and unfortunately, I cannot comment on any specific details regarding exchanges because business considerations and such. But I think eventually Beam will be listed. We are just 3 months old. These things take time. There are a lot of factors at play here. Some of them being the difficulty of integration, and some of them because MIMBLEWIMBLE is very different and works differently. But yeah, this is something we are all aware of, and yes, the community is very aware of it. Yeah, so I think with some patience, we will get there, and let's say there is definitely nothing major standing between us and listing on major exchanges. So all these things will be resolved, and we will get there.
Excellent. How would you think Beam and MIMBLEWIMBLE technology will affect the rest of the crypto market?
So I think MIMBLEWIMBLE brought great amount of interest and attention to the aspect of confidentiality and privacy on the blockchain. I think in many ways it revitalized this entire field because, in my opinion, it's a very elegant solution. You can actually explain it to basically anyone in a matter of like half an hour. It does not involve super complicated math or space tech. It does not involve a lot of different mechanisms combined together. It's a very coherent and very elegant scheme that gives you both the scalability and the confidentiality without having to compromise on any of those. I think it was a great achievement and move forward for the space of confidentiality. I also think that it has inspired a lot of additional research into both science and technology of confidentiality. I'm not sure, like I don't believe MIMBLEWIMBLE is like the end word of these technologies, but I think it's a very important step forward. And I'm very glad we have implemented this protocol and made practical working cryptocurrency based on it. I think today almost everybody is aware of this technology and of the project implementing it, and it appears in a lot of papers and mentions everywhere. I think it made a huge impact on the industry.
Absolutely. So, what does the team think about the current price of Beam and the network hash rate?
Yeah, so the current price of Beam, first of all, the network hash rate is obviously related to price as well. And as for the price itself, it's also related to several different factors. The first one being the inflation rate right now, which is high. And as you know, we have the first halving coming up at the end of this year. So some of that will change. We think that it also has to do with the factors like awareness, adoption, exchanges, like everything plays a role in this. And at this point, I would like to really, thank our community for all the work that they did so far in promoting Beam, our great ambassador team, and all the people that participate and actually help us with that. And I really, really encourage you to keep doing just that. You're doing great so far. And yeah, I think eventually it will also have impact on the price with time.
Absolutely. I think the price of beam is at the moment is one beam equals one beam. I think could could sum it up quite nicely. But yeah, the network hash rate will always dictate any kind of cryptocurrency price as we go ahead. But does Beam have plans to be added to any first tier exchanges?
Yeah, so once again, I cannot comment on any specific. So let's just have some more patience and wait. Yeah. I think it will be fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
So really.
Can we move on to the last section of the AMA tonight regarding the Treasury and the Foundation?
Sure.
So, what is the Treasury Fund used for?
Okay, so as you know, the idea of the Treasury was to be able to raise some money, but in a way that would create an alignment, a good alignment of incentives for everyone involved in the project for a long period of time. So, just to explain in a few words how Treasury works, is that in the first 5 years of the project, 20% of each block is allocated to the Treasury, and from the Treasury it is distributed to our investors who invested money in the project in the beginning, members, and also a large portion of the foundation of the Treasury is allocated for the foundation, which we will discuss a little bit further on. So this is how the Treasury Fund is distributed. All the information exactly about it, what percentages, I think appears at the FAQ part of our website, so I will not go into detail. Mm-hmm. But at the moment, this is how the Treasury works. So it goes to investors, core team members, and to the foundation that we'll discuss, I believe, in the next question.
And can you maybe share progress on that, the Beam Foundation in Switzerland?
Yeah. So I don't think I have any actual updates, and it's also not exactly my area of expertise. I mostly handle the tech, but we are working tirelessly every day to establish the foundation. Mm-hmm. It's a process that is ongoing and moving forward every day. So there are a lot of bureaucracy involved, and it will be done eventually.
Okay. So what if the Beam Foundation, when it's set up, isn't as efficient as the current team? Are there guidelines, and who will lead it? What will it do?
Yeah, all those things are being determined, and they're not finalized yet. But the idea of the foundation is to be able to use the funds that are allocated to it to move forward the Beam protocol and the Beam blockchain beyond the lifetime of Beam company, and to have long-term impact on the strategy and the development of this technology. So this is the idea. I'm not sure exactly who will lead it at the moment. So we are talking to several people that we would like to have on board of directors. But once again, there is nothing specific I can discuss right now.
Okay.
And and the transition to the foundation is actually a process that we have already started in a way. It will take some time to make it. Our goal is to make it as smooth as possible because, of course, it's a different type of governance, but it's very important to us to be able to let go as a company and make this transition smooth, and then allow this foundation to control and to develop protocol further, like for many years to come.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So backtracking a little bit, there was some interest in the discussions that Beam had with Litecoin. So can you give any updates on how the MIMBLEWIMBLE is coming along for Litecoin using extension blocks, or is that something which you're not looking at?
Yeah, we had several discussions with Charlie some time ago. We offered our help to the Litecoin Foundation in whatever they need to implement MIMBLEWIMBLE technology as the extension block from their chain. As far as I know of right now, they are currently working internally on the improvement proposal draft, which will describe how exactly they intend to do that. And it still wasn't shared with us. So yeah, so this is where it is at the moment.
Excellent, excellent. I think it's great that the crypto industry are coming together, regardless of which teams are working. I think it's a great thing that there are teams working together these days. It's something unheard of, I would say. So can I finalise this AMA tonight with you, Alex, just by saying thank you very much for joining us. And it's been excellent listening to all the in-depth detail that you've been given. There is just one question I have to ask you, which is the most asked question in the Beam community at the moment, and that is when moon.
Okay, so
are you up there? Are you up there on the moon already, Alex?
As I look around the industry, I think the moon is going to be crowded very soon. I think we should go to Mars instead.
Yeah, why set your sights on the moon? Let's get a little further out there. Jupiter's big enough for us all, I'm sure.
Yeah. So a lot of planets out there look great. So, but seriously, we actually, as a project, as a company, we are doing a lot of things, and we're doing them all at once. So, if we just list, just the projects we're working on right now at the same time, starting from node improvements, desktop wallets with all the UI and UX and additions, atomic swap, smart side payments, mobile wallets for both iOS and Android, hardware wallets, Lightning Network integration and proof of concept, integration with pools, exchanges, and third-party payment platforms, community engagement system that we will launch soon that will allow community to propose features and vote for them. We have created this Beam Wallet demo machine that allows us to simulate different UI scenarios without actually developing them and show demos on them, which I will use in the video about atomic swap. Not to mention, of course, website, our Telegram bot, and other community engagement tools, the Blockchain Explorer. We're also working on I2P and Tor integration. So this is just the list of things we're doing like now, concurrently at the same time.
Wow.
Yeah. So in addition to that, of course, there are a lot of marketing efforts, conferences, meeting with people, discussing plans, thinking about how to use and implement confidential assets on top of Beam, how to do this, and how the compliance comes in play in different scenarios. Lots of researches on topics like starting from like DAG protocols, consensus protocols, and many more. Like I cannot even remember all of them at once. So I think that going forward at the speed for the year to come will bring us as close to the moon as possible in terms of functionality and practicality, which are, as I said, our goal, without giving up on the quality of the product that I think so far was very high. Yeah, all of these things are happening and are going to happen, and it's very important for us to have the support of the community and talk to us, ask questions, criticize, suggest. We're very open on all channels, Telegram, Discord, and as you know, Gus and Raskul are always there, and Guy Korem is always talking on all channels all the time. So we're listening, we're talking and communicating, and let's keep it this way. It's been great so far. It's been an amazing year. It's been an unbelievable journey for me personally and for the entire team. And let's keep it up, and we will get there.
That's fantastic, Alex. Listen, thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you, and it was amazing. Thank you very much.
Bye now.
Goodbye.